welcome to the Teaching Corner. Today we're going to talk about neuroteach, brain science, and the future of education. And we're going to start with number 3, the third research-based strategy that all teachers should be using with every student. And that is that every one of our students should be given more opportunities to think metacognitively on their learning performance. So they need to plan, monitor, and evaluate and reflect on all of those processes as they're going through. So one of the things that we really have to work at as teachers is helping to cultivate a yet sensibility. So one of the most critical non-cognitive skills that our students have to cultivate as their potential learners is mindset. And too often our kids have a fixed mindset, and we need to really help them with a growth mindset. In other words, instead of saying, I can't do it, they say, I can't do it yet. And research shows this correlation between mindset and academic performance, or our ability to work at our highest levels and tackle the most difficult challenges. So a growth mindset requires the development of clearly defined strategies for improvement and the enlistment of support from others. So struggle is really important, as we talked about before, that without challenge, our boredom reigns supreme, but it's got to be really deliberate difficulties, something that our students are able to achieve, and it's really good for learning and getting something to stick in our students' brains. If something is too easy, they don't remember it, but if they remember having to struggle through it a little bit, even though at the time sometimes they're not going to say that was their favorite assignment, a lot of times looking back and reflecting on it as seniors in high school, they'll be like, I really remember so-and-so. They were kind of tough, but man, do I really remember what they taught me. So we've got to also scaffold for our students. So we're maintaining the challenge, but we're providing accessibility to it. And the way that they say this in the book is that we're lowering the barriers, but not the bar. We're still keeping a high level of expectation for our students, but we're making it so that they can access that. And in order for our students to get there, it takes practice. In order to be really master anything in any field, it takes 10,000 hours of practice. If we want to be a concert pianist, if we want to be a really good athlete, if we want to be really good in math, whatever it is, it takes 10,000 hours to master. So they've got to also recognize what high quality deliberate practice means for them in the context of their learning strengths and weaknesses, in the context of the tasks set before them. And that's part of our job as teachers, is to help them figure out what that would be for them. And we've got to provide scaffolding for them to be able to reach the challenge that we're asking them to do. But then also, as they get more competent, we peel that scaffolding away, so it's not something that stays forever. And so one of the things in creating a yet sensibility is that our students need to use a strategy, and I've put one on the screen here, but they've got to follow through and work hard at this strategy. We can't, I can't introduce something like COPS for editing one time, and we use it 2 or 3 times, and then we never use it again, and then we say, oh, that strategy didn't really work. Every single time we go to edit a sentence, I have to make sure that my students are using that particular strategy. And then after we've worked really hard with that strategy, we need to evaluate how it's working. And if it's not working, we need to acknowledge this. Every one of our students has different learning strengths and weaknesses. Certain strategies are going to work for one student and not another. Some kids need note cards. Some kids need colored highlighters. Some kids need to rewrite their notes. All of our students are going to learn in different ways. So then if it isn't working, we want to tweak the strategy or devise a new strategy and then evaluate how that works. But we also want to not do this in isolation. So we've really got to teach our students to use the strategy and then converse with us, talk to our parents, because maybe they use a strategy and they still get an F. maybe they get a 59 on this test, but on the last test, they made a 30. So the strategy actually did work for that student. They just need to continue practicing with it to continue to get better. And then we're going to repeat this process all over again and do it again and again until we've helped our students develop a toolbox that works specifically for them so that they can achieve their highest levels possible. And we've got to make sure that this is actionable, that there's something that they can do, and that they're accountable. We as teachers want to be very careful that we don't say, well, at least you tried. We want to say, at least you tried. Now, what can we learn from that? What are we going to try next? What worked? What didn't? Should we try a different strategy? Did you like that strategy? Because we want them to enjoy what they're doing as well. But, did it work? Should we tweak it? So we're constantly asking ourselves and them and fixing and tweaking. And every opportunity is a learning opportunity. And then having a yet sensibility gives the student confidence to seek and tackle new challenges. So one of the dangers, sometimes even for our A+ kids, is that if they have a fixed mindset, I have to be the best at everything. Oftentimes they won't take risks. They won't try new things. They won't do something that they're not absolutely certain that they can get 100% at or an A at. And so helping all of our students, regardless of the level, helping all of our students develop this helps all of them seek challenges and tackle new things. And it does take challenge, but research shows that when our students are challenged by something that's interesting to them, their intrinsic motivation increases and the knowledge is more likely to be embedded in long-term memory. And remember, ultimately, that's our goal. We want it to go into long-term storage. We want them to be lifelong, long-term learners, not just cram for a quiz or a test and then forget it the next day. And of course, this does take trial and error, and it can't be superseded by our need to cover the material. So one thing that was incredibly impactful to me a number of years ago, I read about a study where they worldwide gave a science test all over the world, and they compared different countries and how different countries did. And here in the United States, we tend to say that our curriculum is a mile long and an inch deep. In other words, we cover lots of material, but briefly. And what was interesting is the United States actually did not score as well as some of the other countries, European countries that went into great depth but covered fewer subjects. And the interesting thing about it is because they went into such depth with the subjects that they covered, that even on the test, when they got to questions that they haven't covered, that we had covered here in the United States, the students were able to figure out the answer using their scientific reasoning that they had learned from going in depth with other subjects. So it's really important that we make sure that we're helping them become better learners, and we're not so concerned about covering a ton of curriculum, but we're making sure that they're becoming deep learners. And then reflection is key. We've got to provide our students with these metacognitive moments to think back on their learning. And this is really critical in teaching and learning a strategy. So kids will have this really brief moment of honesty right after an assessment. But we want to make sure that this is not a belabored thing. Right after the test, we're going to ask them good questions. What did what worked? What didn't? What strategy did you use? How did it work for you? How can we tweak it? And then we move on, because too much of anything can be counterproductive. We're not going to spend 3 days on this. That wastes good, instructional time for other things that we should be doing. And also it's just not productive. But we need to create opportunities where they really care about learning. And I love this. The book says, where the potential joy of learning shouts so loudly, it drowns out the background noise of achievement and grades. That's what we want, is for our students to be excited about learning, for them to want to come to school, for them to want to do things, for them to want to seek challenges and try new things and be okay with sometimes failing, that sometimes we're not going to get it right, because every scientist in the world has failed hundreds, if not thousands of times before they got it right and discovered something new. So the assessment 360 is what we want to do is be sure that we're giving more frequent formative assessments. Not all of them have to be graded, right? But giving them the opportunities. We want to be sure too, as we're getting prepared for those tests, that we're using active study techniques. We're not just asking them to reread their notes. We're asking them to engage with the material, ask questions. We want to give opportunity for students to have some choice. So, would you like a multiplication test or would you like a short answer test? Would you like, to take a test, or would you like to do some performance like a poster or a play or a PowerPoint or some other way to show us information, and give them opportunities to have choice. And so obviously sometimes we have to limit, maybe it's this one, or maybe the class as a whole decides the way to assess this would be this way for this time, and then we'll do it a different way next time. We've got to be sure that we're giving them scaffolded feedback and chances to fix their work and to act on it, and then give them that time for reflection and metacognition to think about what they've been doing. So I hope that was helpful. If it was, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.